And we're live. Welcome to the Straight Talk Mind and Muscle podcast. Welcome to the WIremu radio show, and welcome to my guest. Okay, I've got the title all sorted out. Sergeant Major of the Army, WIremu Moffitt. It's great to see you, man.
Nice to see you too, Damo.
I'm stunned to utter those words. I remember back to when I first met you, and congratulations on your position. I couldn't have been more proud to see you achieve that.
Thanks, mate. Really good. Well, it's my privilege, but it is a long career appointment that everybody wants, and then suddenly it's yours.
So, Mu, I'd really like to get the listeners and the viewers an idea of your background. And I did a bit of crowdsourcing of some of my questions, and obviously we know each other fairly well from our joint careers. But let's get an idea of your background and your current position. So, you're now Sergeant Major of the Army. I mean, the pinnacle of a non-unit, not an officer. How did you start? How old were you when you joined the military, and how long did it take you to rise to that level?
Yeah, well, I suppose my story goes back to around about 1989, 1990, when I finished school. I was going through a process of joining the Army, to join the Army with effect January 1990. So I joined as a regular force cadet, which meant you could join the forces between the ages of 16 and a half and 17 and a half, beyond which you would join the Army as a regular force. So calculating those years, I've been in just on my 34th year now.
Wow, that is stunning. And you've only just started to get the grey hairs, my friend.
I cut them back as much as I can to reduce that indication.
I was just out for a run before we did this show, and I was just thinking back to all our comrades that worked with, and we're all starting to get there. A bit of the silver fox is coming in.
Yeah, absolutely. It affects us all in one way or another. I guess it's how you feel, though.
Yeah, and that's really why I wanted to get you on the show, and I appreciate your time. I must say, and we spoke just before, you're literally one of the busiest guys I know, and I want to delve into how you do it. But to get you on the show, it's been almost a year coming, I think. What about after you joined the military? Because I knew you in the special forces, obviously. What was your steps to go from an Army cadet through to joining New Zealand SAS Group?
Yeah, well, as you know, I think you and I would have discussed this at length, I think, in the old days. But I only joined the Army for one reason, and that was to go to the group or to the regiment as it is today. I was born into the Army, son of a soldier and an Air Force mother. So I grew up on a combination of bases and camps. And look, my intent was always to go to regular force cadets and get out of school as quick as I could. I was no academic. But I was a really great practitioner, I thought. I thought I could take an idea, be taught something, and activate it. So the infantry seemed to be the right place for me to go after regular force cadets. And after graduating, I had the opportunity to go back to WIremu, which is the centre of all our training for recruits and officers. And I went back there as an instructor, which in itself was a real privilege to be selected out of the 74, 75 odd cadets that graduated. Myself and 4 others got selected to run the next class. But a long story short, after about 4 to 6 months of that, I made my way to the 1st Battalion, Royal New Zealand Infantry Regiment in Linton, at Palmerston North. And I spent a few years there. Dad always said to me, set your foundations strong. And for me, that meant becoming an infantier, a combatant, and just understanding the basics of soldiering. Yeah, so that was really my footsteps into getting to the regiment, which happened very shortly after that, I must say. But I really achieved a lot in my 3 to 4 years in the infantry, and I never look back on it with any ill feeling. To me, it was the foundation of a great career. And I always say I'm of the infantry, and people will see the badges on my arm, that red diamond that you would recognise. That's who I am. The fact that I served at special operations is more like icing on the cake.
Absolutely. And I think your answer there, Mu, shows what I see in you as your absolute humility, and your dad, rest in peace. It was a great inspiration to me, and so were you. Your humility showed through when I first met you. We were doing our counter-terrorist team course, literally the lowest of the low in that unit. And you were just so humble at sharing your vastly professional knowledge to us, and it just showed us where we wanted to go to. And exactly right, those basics of what you learn in the infantry is our base.
Yeah, I agree. I've always said over my career, maybe it's something I stole from someone else, but you always make the next class smarter and better than yourself. And through doing that, you ensure that the legacy of whatever institute you're in or whatever skill or mastery you're trying to pass on, it gets only stronger. And any instructor or teacher that does otherwise would only ruin, right?
Yeah, absolutely right. I found that out in the group. When you teach, you become your comprehension rises so much, and by teaching you learn so much better, which I guess is the highest standard of personal discipline, because discipline is to be a disciple of or to teach.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Nothing to add there, really. They call it the two-step learn. You've got to know something to teach it, and then once you've taught it, you really understand it.
That perhaps segues into really one of my biggest questions is, what does the Sergeant Major of the New Zealand Army do?
Yeah, look, I get this question a lot, and I'd love to say there was some captions on, captions off type phrase that I could give you, but she's pretty all encompassing. And the fact that I am the senior soldier of the New Zealand Army, and that statement alone, it would tell you that I'm a representative. I'm the voice of the soldiers and the enlisted force. I'm a senior advisor to the Chief of Army as the custodian of the service. But underneath all that, a number of lines of activity that you have to do to help the CA run an army. But let me just boil it back and crystallize it. In terms of my charter, I am the senior enlisted advisor, the senior non-commissioned officer of the New Zealand Army. And my role is to inform and advise the chief of the well-being, the welfare, the discipline, and in a sense, the capability of the New Zealand Army. From my perspective, I work with the command chain, not through it. But you and I know that's a by, with, and through type capability. I don't push this big badge to get myself into a camp or a base. I'm quite humble, and you have to work with them. But there's also a statement there that there's no place I can't go in the Army to get the answers I need for the chief.
Yeah, that's a great summary there. I'm thinking one of the boys, but I remember when I was a young soldier, how feared the regimental sergeant major was, and how much on a pedestal the sergeant major of the Army was. So I'm going to come back and get into that with you soon. But I have a question that I thought about while I was out on the run, and it's hopefully it's one you've never been asked before, is what's your greatest achievement to date, both personal and career-wise?
Yeah, those are always the trickiest questions, eh? And for me, talking about yourself can be so tricky when you've been raised not to say how sweet you are as a sweet potato, mate. Look, I want to probably steal a little bit of a line from the guys who made the best computers in the world and Apple, and say that it's the teams you build. And I say that reflectively because there's lots of little things you do as a senior appointment or as you grow up through the system, but as you really reflect on a time of service, and that is exactly what I do, I serve the people. That's in my very title. Once you understand what that means as a job, then you understand that all the teams you mentored and created or helped create or helped build and develop, they're your biggest achievement. So if I went back to the unit, I would consider some of the debts that you help make. It would be some of the small capabilities you help nuance. It's the one or two soldiers that you make better and you allow them to succeed. It sounds pretty philosophical, but to me it's not. It's just being at the right place, the right cornice of a conversation, and then being able to lead someone in the right place for them to go on. So yeah, it's about the teams. It's about mentoring. It's about coaching people for me.
That's a phenomenal answer, Moo. and that was the intent behind this show and why I wanted to get you on, especially after talking to Joe Hortai, talking about being in the service of others. But I must pause and realize and respect that I think you're the first person still in the service that I've interviewed. And I do say I interview the best people in the world, what they do. You know, we've got scientists, Olympic coaches, and so on. But you're literally at the pinnacle of the New Zealand Army. And a lot of the veterans that I interview, for different reasons, you know, they're all out 2 years, 10 years, 15 years. So it's phenomenal to get that exact same answer, Moo, from someone in the trenches that people have been reflective on 15 years later. Being in the service of others, if you can help, you know, you said 2 people, we often say 1 or 2 people, if we can help them with our words, we've done our job, and they go on to make the team. It's stunning.
Yeah, cool. I'm glad the answer works. I mean, for you and I, having discussed this before, maybe years ago now, almost a decade ago, but the answer doesn't change, eh? But it does take you a bit of reflection to get there, whether you're a rescuer, whether you're a built mentor or coach. Some of us are, some of us aren't. But I think it's just an understanding that I say to my junior NCOs all the time, is that you've got to recognize at some point that you are that person that someone's looking up to. And therefore there becomes this responsibility, maybe even more seriously as an accountability of oneself, to sort of give something of you to someone else to get better. You know, and that's what I think the Army and the Navy and the Air Force are. The services are just that. We'll never be in the job forever. It's a serious business when it goes live, and all you can do is put them in a position of power to make the right decision or better judgment.
That's a great reflection of the responsibility. And as you say, Moo, it's difficult. It is a serious position. You've got to realize that. I think that's difficult to take on. And maybe that's what is so difficult when we're out. I reflect on Dr. Dan Pronk, the regimental doctor over here for SASR a few years back. And it seems the high-performing guys, once they're out, they're the ones that find it so hard to accept, ask for, or even identify that they need a bit of assistance, because we're used, perhaps what you said, we're always assisting others.
Yeah, I think that's a real phenomenon. I'm sure there's a scientist that's talked about it, but you know, you said at the start of your show that I'm busy. You know, I confided in you that can be a good and a bad trait. But sometimes it can be victim of, you know, like helping so many people, you've got to know your limits too.
Yeah.
And, you know, rescuers love rescuing people. You like to be involved and be needed, is the old clause. You want to be needed. But I think as long as it's in a worthy cause.
Absolutely. What support do you have around you, given I know how many plates you're spinning and your own personal standards? What support structure do you have around you personally to allow you to affect that so well?
Yeah, it's a small team. It's broader if you really look for it. But, you know, for me, it's largely my family, my whānau. You know, my centre unity is really my wife, Fiona, and the kids. She's heard my rants for 30 odd years now. But because you've done it for so long, we know how to calm each other down and put ourselves back in focus pretty quickly. Around that, of course, is the office of the chief that I work for, and the great people that we have here in Army staff. And then obviously, you know, the third layer to that really is the warrant officers, the senior enlisted, and the soldiers that are around me. You know, I lose count of the number of people that say, hey, you're looking after yourself. Are you getting enough sleep? Are you getting out for a run? And they mean it. Obviously, there's a little bit of jest because they can see I'm pretty tired, but they also do it, you know, because they know it's that high performance thinking that if I'm not doing it, then I'm not helping others. So, yeah, I've probably got one of those biggest support networks that anyone could want. It's whether you call on it.
Yeah, absolutely. That's phenomenal. I wanted to touch on that, how you fit everything in, but one of the viewer questions sort of touched on it. So I'll touch on that a little bit. And Mark was asking me, how important is it to maintain your own physical readiness? You know, do you know your own physical standards, and why is that important to you now, if I then contextualize that again, young soldier looking up, literally, because they always seem to be taller and bigger than me. The RSMs and the Sergeant Major of the Army, they were big boys. They didn't look like they're in shape to run our 2.4 Ks. So how important is it for you to stay and maintain in great physical shape, Moo?
Look, I have to side with that, because it's one of my mantras when I'm talking to people or I'm writing about articles. I'm saying stay in shape. To me, it's super important. Beyond your mental cognition and your health upstairs, for me, physicality and spiritually come equal in that. So, the Army will tell you that I'm out and about all the time, or you'll see my posts. That's me just trying to convey to others or share or commit to others that I'm out there doing it. So I'm going to be out doing a body armor run. I'm going to be hitting the hills of WIremu last week, as I was with the PDI Corps.
Yep.
That's not to prove that I'm better than anyone or that I'm trying to be a young buck again. It's really to say, at least I'm just committing, to being physical and getting out there. I just cannot inspire a force below or beside me if I'm not out there doing the same thing they are. That's my bottom line answer.
Yeah, awesome. The next question I've got was one that I wondered about, the difference between special forces and regular forces, because again, when I met you, you were a highly professional soldier, very skilled at your job, and then you went on to become the RSM of one NZSAS group. I'm not sure the timing of might have been regiment at the time, so apologies. But how do you meld that special forces mentality that we have with literally being the gruff RSM, the Sergeant Major of the Army that we envisage? So it's a very different skill set and psychology you bring to it, I suggest.
Yeah, just to confirm your question, you're really talking about that the dynamic between a unit RSM and being the RSM of the Army.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we called the unit RSM by this first name. It's not Sir.
Yeah, it's a tricky thing. I think when you're down and in, like an RSM is, he or her job is to mold the culture and the capability of a unit. They're really a down and inward looking organization, and you're really just looking up to stay aware. And so sometimes there's a little bit of fear, and fear is not the right word, but there's a committal there that you've done everything that they've done, and through that experience and exposure, you can lead in the traditional alpha sense. At the Army level, obviously I have to lead through others. And so my leadership presence is largely about leading other organizational leaders. It's making sure that my behaviors match the rhetoric, that my identity and my character are the same thing. Because if there's any conflict between the two, then you're just not trustable, you're not believable. So what I'm trying to say in that is that I have to be approachable. I have to be able to talk to both my chief and have his trust and reputational aspects in line. I have to be able to talk to the lowest private and not scare him to the point that he or she is not going to talk to me, because I'm approachable, and you can't get the pulse if you've got a jittery target. So look, I balance it. Sometimes you've got a gruff, and that's about things that soldiers already know about, and it's an expectation they know, and they break it. But you could probably ask this Army how many times I've yelled or screamed or even argued, and it would be very little. I'm largely a by witness through, Damo.
Great answer, Moo. I'd like to sort of tie up about you with a couple more questions and go into perhaps raising that modern warrior and paying it forward, as Joe Hortai said, about helping out the next warrior generation. So given what you've done, what did you have to sacrifice to get to this level? Is there anything that you had to sacrifice through that 34 years in the military to rise to SMA?
Yeah, look, it's probably not a well discussed or exposed part of the business of how much you sacrifice. I'll give you a couple off the top of my head. Certainly, there's going to be time with family. There's going to be time with your loved one, especially your primary, if you have one of those in your life. Thea and I sacrificed a lot when we were young because the unit was my actual committal. To do anything less than 100% on that would probably have resulted in failure. But they understand that. I think a unique partnership. They know you've got something to do, but it's when that goes on for decades. And I call it being at the swinging end of a toggle rope. When you're swinging that thing and you're at the center, you hold the gravity. You're at the center point of everything that's going on. But the people that are at the end of that toggle rope, they're swinging, they're hanging on, and it's a lot heavier at that end. And so I've just come to understand that you've got to balance that as much as you can. And the second point I'd make about sacrifice, apart from the stresses of the life, is really your family, like your extended family. You can become, I think is a better way of saying it, quite insular to the institute you run. When you take on a family of 7,000 or 8,000 extra people, and you try and have a relationship with a number of them, professionally, as a teacher, as a mentor, as an icon, you can lose touch with your own family. That's just reality. There's only so many hours in the day. I would say that I lost touch a little bit with my Māori whanangatanga, and then I've really just tried to connect back with that in the last sort of couple of years or so, and I'm getting deeper and deeper back into it. Like, who am I as a person? Where did I come from? What is my wakapapa, as we would say in New Zealand?
It really sounds like your self-reflection as you're going, which is absolutely one of the epitomes of what you do in Special Forces to improve, is on point. And it'd be interesting when I talk to you about the transition question in the future. You touched on social media, you said posts before, and you do use social media very well. Remember the press out challenge that we went through for a great cause. And I looked back, because a Sergeant Major of the Army is obviously a shared account from every one, and you do it very, very well. And you're putting yourself out there publicly. But I wanted to share a story that you probably don't know about yourself. So in the unit, we're not supposed to really let people know what we do. And if we get a phone call, and I took the phone call at about 3 o'clock in the morning, my first time taking a phone call. I took a phone call from Fort Bragg, and when you answer that phone, we can't say that that person even works there. So I took a phone call at 3 in the morning. I don't know what's going on. I'm trying to find a pen, trying to find a piece of paper. And this person, lovely lady from Fort Bragg in America, rings up and says, "Oh, just ring up at WIremu Moffitt, and I'd like to get his qualifications. He's on this course, and I'd need to know all this information." And I've just joined the unit. I'm trying to figure out, how do I not tell this person this guy works here? It's obviously incredibly important. This person's phoning New Zealand from USA. I need to get all the details. And that was my first contact with who the hell WIremu Moffitt is, trying to do the right thing by the unit protocols.
Very cool. I'd love to know what that course I was going to go on, or what I was shortlisted for.
I think it was a jump master course off the top of me, and some parachuting jumped in my head somewhere.
Good. Oh, good.
So your use of social media, Moo, and that's, I guess, going in the direction of New Zealand Army now. That's a very clever and use of the modern technology, and you've always been up on it. How do you find? Let's talk about. I put down here direction of New Zealand Army, recruit resilience, standards of physicality. We're having to move into the modern world. So the new soldiers you see coming on now, how do they compare? What are you looking for? And how do we turn them into a very good warfighter?
Yeah, it's a good question, Damon. In terms of the use of social media for that, I've largely not been, I've not been successful in trying to bridge those factual elements of the Army to what I put on my post. My posts in Facebook and Instagram are largely about where I am and what I'm doing, what I'd like you to think you could be doing if you're in the Army.
Yep.
It's largely a narrative about, this is better work stories sort of thing, And I do a lot of it for my chief, who probably, you'll watch this one day, but he'll probably be cross with me. But I mean, he doesn't like social media. He's got a team of people that do that. But to come back to your real question, your context question about how do we get better warriors about this generation, You know, I would say that there's a massive generational change that we both know is going on. And a lot of people that love social media probably think that's the weight of the task is in that cell phone, but I'm having trouble trying to convey the realities of warfighting. How heavy is a gun? How heavy is a pack? How heavy is ammunition? How smart do cyber technicians need to be? What is the informational age? How do you best prepare for the grey continuum space in the very Pacific we're in? Those are all very stretched answers. And sometimes a post in the media is just not enough to get them there. But what I am trying to do is just reach out through the recruiting networks, through our schools, through talks, presentations, you know, some of the realities of the Army in 2022 and going forward, because it is very different to where I was. And then so many things are the same. You know, I know that there's sort of about 18 to 22% bone density decreases occurring across the world just because we don't jump up and down and jump out of trees anymore. People can't throw a rock 25 meters because we don't throw stones and sticks anymore. So what something is a very functional movement is not a bench press. It's not a squat. You know, these are quite functional systems we're talking about, and a lot of our people just aren't there. And so more of my talks are really talking about that functional space. What are those 9 to 12 absolute functions that we have as a soldier that we really need to work on?
Yeah, great answer. One of the reasons I melded that question of mine with some of the other people is Nick Caldwell, former SASR here, nice fella. We're doing a course. He was instructing on a course the other day with me in it. And he was speaking about when he joined, the Australian Army had actually brought their physical test from 5Ks down to 2.4, I think, because back then, you know, 25 years ago, the hardness had changed. It wasn't the farmers, the farm men at that time joining the military. It was more city dwellers, and now it's literally happened again. I know SF has a standard; it doesn't change. And I might talk about that more later on, but what about New Zealand Army? I'm having the chance to speak to you now. Do standards have to change? Are we looking for a different physical specimen? I mean, is it more of a mental space, a technological space? The 5-year-old who can use an iPad, you know, we had email come in 2002.
This is quite a complex answer, yes, but let me give you a simple one, because there'll be a lot of technical people that read this and watch this and could tear it apart, because it's multifaceted at the very least. Absolutely, there's a mindset shift. You know, we need greater cognition, and I'm not talking about academia, but you need someone who can join the dots fast, who's a great kinesthetic learner, who can take practicality and academics information and then join the three together to achieve something. In physicality and function, certainly I've sort of stated up front, I don't think we're there. I've read enough science and papers out of the US Army after 20 years of war that our worst days out there, we were not fit enough for it. You know, we were gym fit, we could bench press and squat certain things, but in terms of pushing a pack, body armor, ammo, and getting up sharp hills, we just weren't there. So I don't know what the balance point is between anaerobics and what's the other one?
Aerobic, strength.
Aerobic, sorry, strength, yeah. What those balances are between it. But, you know, I think it's somewhere around the pentathlete, right?
Yeah.
You need to be pretty good at everything. And that's the great generalist. So we've got a team working on this right now in our physical performance squadron. You know, they're looking hard at what these functional spaces are. What do we do more of, an enabling space versus a combatant space? How hard do we train in the training in the garrison world to the point where sometimes we break ourselves for the real job? You know, how do we make this last over a career of 20, or in my case 34, and other cases 40 years? How do we manage our wahine, our women, our postpartum? You know, do we make them come back to a standard that's unachievable, and do we need to think smarter about those approaches? I'll pause there because that was a long answer.
Yeah, thank you, Moo. It's a great answer, though. It's one that's intrigued me, and given the chance to speak to someone at your level current, I really am intrigued. It's very interesting. I mean, I think I'm giving a talk this week on testosterone and the reduction of that over the years. We have changed, and we do have to evolve. I'll never forget the CEO of NZSAS at the time stating, if we're not looking 5-10 years ahead, we're actually going backwards. So we do have to evolve forward so fast in the military. Let me ask you a question from someone we both know, Jimmy. I won't say the last name, but what do you attribute to your longevity at such a high level of military operations for so long, a long career at the top, physical and mental demands? And I think you've touched on a lot of this already, but what would you attribute to your longevity for your career physically and still succeeding, Moo?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's a great question from Jimmy. No one ever knows the real answer, even if you're super reflective. I think you contribute different parts of that continuum of high performance to what you do, but you never quite know what the magic element was. But from my reflection, let me give you a couple of ideas about why I think I've lasted. The first one would just be mindset. Like I think I've got a strong enough mindset to understand what I've got to do and how long I've got to do it. And then for me, it's just about joining the dots about how best I approach that. So how much reading do I do to develop myself? How much tertiary study would I try and do to achieve it without blowing myself out? And it's the same with physicality. You know, you can hit it hard and go crossfitting for 5 to 8 years and don't let up, but you'll look great at the beach. But can you take it on for another 3 decades? That's a little bit of a sarky way of just saying that I've managed my fitness just back from that peak. And going through the sine wave, I've been able to just balance over time. And overall, I think you get this sort of diagonal lift from low left to high right, and you're able to sustain it much longer. But what's actually happening in behind the scenes is you're going up and you're going down in quite a balanced routine, a rhythmic. And I would say it's the same for all the disciplines within high performance for me. If you had 4 to 5 different elements, from spirituality all the way through to psychology and physiology, I think I do a little bit of each of them well enough to succeed.
That is brilliant. And it's amazing to hear your answers when I compare them to a scientist, and I mean this top scientist in the world at a certain thing, or I compare it to a psychologist or a psychiatrist. I think I said in one of my interviews, back in the day when I was in the gym as a young fella, 18, 19 years old, you think the world revolves around that gym and you're smashing it. And we used to look at the old guys, and my God, I say old, and they were probably 40. They would never go as hard as we did, but they were twice our size and they're there every day. And I'm older, I'm still waiting for the wisdom to kick in, but I'm the same as you. I train, but I train because I want every day to get better, not to achieve it all in that one day, and for that curve to go the right way.
Yeah, I'm totally with you on that.
But what was so great about your answer was you've then used that same intent on your other aspects, which is a great way of looking at things. So thank you.
Thanks, mate. Well, I hope the perception becomes a reality as I start to look at it be a bit closer, right? And get somebody to tear it apart and see if it actually does work. But no, thanks for your insight.
Well, I do have a question there. I'll come back to that one, Eric Miari's. Sorry, sometimes I can't believe I'm in the situation of being an interviewer when I've been an operator and just a firefighter. And you got to think 3 steps ahead in this game. I'll come back to it when I get my head around it, but I've got a question I wrote down about females, because we've gone from special forces. I remember the last year I was at the unit, we were expecting 2 females to come on selection. And I'll tell the story for the listeners. You probably know it as well. We were like, great, let's see what they got. Let's see them turn up the start line. And unfortunately, in their unit that they're in at the time, probably the wannabes. I say there's a difference between a has-been and a wannabe. Talk them out of it. When the actual people that are trying to impress or get through the panel for was us, we were going, let's go, let's watch you do that. My question is about females in an infantry or combat role, and then do you see females making it into a badge special forces operator role in the future?
Yeah, this is pretty easy, this one, to answer straight, and then the real trick is in the detail. It's in the devil of how you do this right.
Yeah.
The answer, whether there's a strong enough wahine and smart enough, is a no-brainer. They exist, they're here. We've got a number of great ladies in our infantry regiments and our combat enablers from artillery, infantry, including snipers in the reconnaissance platoon. We've got them in the engineers, and they do equally as well as the men. I've had a number of ladies try out for, the regiment in the time that I was there, in the training system. Sadly, in the time that I was there, I didn't see one pass. They may have since I've been gone. So that's all on its own.
Mm.
I think they will get in, and I think they will succeed. I think the trick is how long, and whether it's actually good for us long term. And I say this purely from an untrained clinician. If I look at the physiology of a person that's required to do what a full spectrum operator is designed to do day after day, I'm talking about the 30 to 40 kilos worth of body armor, shields. I'm talking about packs and webbing in the special reconnaissance role or a direct action hit. I'm talking about long-term movement in the jungle, in the desert. That puts a lot of strain physiologically on a body. And what I worry about most is just that we do that for year after year after year with some of our wahine. But I've had a great conversation with a few of them, and they think they can take it. I just think and what they've said to me is it's just about the standards. It's about your way you go about it, about how we strengthen them, how we condition them, how we build their endurance in a smart way so that they can do this for a long time. So no, my baseline answer, Damo, is they're certainly there. I know they are because I've met them. I think the trick is the how. And I mean that just in terms of not just physical, emotional, but there's also that support mechanism when you put them into the combat arms as well, as what's their cohort? How do they sustain themselves in that way as well? That's another answer.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. It's really interesting to watch that space. Related to that, what importance does New Zealand Army, I think I have to speak to New Zealand Army and not New Zealand SAS, what importance do they put on human performance optimization, sleep, nutrition, recovery, the human performance outside just our normal standards? What importance does New Zealand Army place on that for our soldiers to continue to get better?
Yeah, look, there's been a lot of work put on this. And the way I want to answer this is more about the intent behind making human performance a higher priority. It's certainly a high priority within my eyes. I've been talking to my Chief of Army about it quite consecutively over the last sort of 12 months about how important I think it is in terms of creating the better soldier, the fuller, more holistic soldier. The second part of the answer to answer it is like the how. You've got a niche size force. It's not the biggest force you could have out there. That's both an advantage and a disadvantage in terms of making these programs work. So performance in itself is actually outcast. It's delegated out to the Defence Force, what we call the Physical Performance Squadron, and that's a joint force entity made up of a bunch of different disciplines, including our PDI Corps. And only just recently, they've been talking much more in depth about how they define this. And I say that just to caveat my answer. But if I come back to your core question, we value it. A few individuals do, but I'm not sure our army has quite got behind it yet. Like, what does it look like? What's the framework that defines which elements you get after? And then how do you deliver that en masse? Because what I'd say to you, Damo, and you know this in your profession anyway, is that having high performance in a 15 to 30 person team is achievable. You have about 15 to 20 players and you have 15 to 20 enablers. When you scale that through the thousands, it becomes a challenge. And I've not met a high performance operator, as in a director of a capability, that said that they've done that well. Albeit in my own and my connections around the world, I do know of a couple of teams that have been able to nail it in about 2,000, maybe 3. But yeah, I know that's not a full answer, but I really wanted to say that, yeah, we believe in it. We've got a vision about it. It's super important. But what I'd say is philosophically, we've just got a bit of a mental shift to go from thinking high performance in humans all the way through to delivering it en masse versus the minority. I hope that makes sense to you, mate.
It really does. And, you know, I'm about to use the words back in my day. I remember being in the barracks in one battalion, and we were the minority. The guys were doing shakes after PT and some form of recovery. But I would hope that the war fighters of the future, they're taking that on as their own personal responsibility. It's really nice to see Defence Force and them possibly meeting in the middle to produce a better product.
Yeah, mate.
A couple more questions and then we'll wrap it up, I think. So coming back to the other one, my notes were Eric Miari's a great guy who's a single mission operator, SMU. He relates mental health just like being physical health. If we get a knee injury, a mental health injury would be like the same sort of thing. You know, oh, you're not looking so good today, Moo. You're a bit down. Go see the doc. How's that look? What is the direction with mental health? Looking after that in the Defence Force, relating it to just another thing, because again, back in our day, it wasn't something we spoke about. It wasn't something we could even bring to the table.
Yeah, good question again, Damo, and I'm glad you asked it, because for once in a long time, I've been able to say we're after this, right? There's a real mental shift going on. People understand mental health in the New Zealand Defence Force way more than what they did in the day when we were there. There's just a lot more empathy, I think, from leader to subordinate. There's a lot more awareness about what mental health is and its range of spectrum. And I just see it being used a lot more now in the right way, as in people are coming forward when they're having a bad day, be it physical, be it in the headspace, and being able to say to people, I need time, I'm having a bad one. And leaders just turn around and going, look, this is what I can offer you. If you need the time, take the time. If you need a resource, click on this hyperlink and go and visit some people. If it's a mentor, if it's even right up to clinical, it's really available, like in a big way. So yeah, I'm really wrapped. The Army and the NZDF has done really well in this space, and there's not a week that goes by that I'm not in it.
Brilliant answer. Brilliant answer. And again, back to when we first met as an up-and-coming team, you were that breath of fresh air that gave us that a mentor, someone we look up to, giving us that mental break from our instructors at the time. So even that little bit can help you out. I appreciate the answer. I know you've got to shoot off, so I'm going to ask you a last question. Moo, what's in store for you post SMA, mate? What are you looking forward to?
Oh, good. Look, I love your optimism that there's something after here. Look, the answer is I'm not sure, but the reality is, I don't go anywhere without a plan. So I've got a plan. I will definitely try to stay in the force at the defence level. I can't stay in the Army any longer at the rank I'm in. So, I will be trying out for the Warrant Officer of the Defence Force, or what we call the WODF, to take over a good colleague of mine, Titch Mortaboy. But I'm conscious that I've got some pretty stiff competition, and there's some great people out there. And it all comes down to right person, right time, right place, and right staff factor. My alternative is I do a bit of leadership training on the side with Whakaaro Limited. It's a company about giving leadership expertise back to a new generation of New Zealanders. So that's an off-ramp. And the third option is to go back to what I love. Maybe as a CFR officer, I've got the option, unlike many others, to return back to the discipline that I love so much.
Brilliant answer. Well, Moo, thank you for your time. I appreciate your patience. You've always been there for me to reach out to. I want to thank you for that. And it's just a pleasure to see you at the position you're in. Any warfighter up and coming, you're a person to aspire to. I appreciate you very much. Thank you.
Damo, you're welcome, mate. It's a real privilege and a pleasure to be here with you, old mate. There's nothing better than, I think, is passing a few gems to some up and coming people. So please call me up again. Let's finish up another half of this when you get time.
Brilliant.
Over.
Thanks so much, Moo. Brilliant.